So this billionaire wants everybody to write checks to him. That doesn't seem. He says that it would provide enough to close the wealth gap. Just to burst that balloon here, you realize that there are more white people on federal benefits than black people, right? I don't get mad at me. I'm giving you government figures. I'm giving you actual figures that came because they tally it up, as you know. We talked about this a couple of years ago. But the idea that this is something that should be done, or that there is nothing that makes sense about this. And here's why. First off, I mean, he does own several homes. And for someone like this to demand of everyone, people who've never engaged in an activity, for them to bear, which, by the way, this is unchristian and it's anti-biblical, because the children are not responsible for the sins of the father. And this is reaffirmed in the gospel. Happy to have that Bible lesson, or give it rather. But this is a part of CRT. He wants critical race theory also in terms of education. But he says that you have to ask people to pay out of their paychecks for it to be reparations. He says the first was atonement, the other was monetary. And he says that it was supposed to come from the government representing the people. Okay, yeah, so that's the people. That's what you're demanding. And so he was mad that there's not any legislation that has been included in this. Now, this is problematic just because you're only asking, first off, I don't know if you're asking people who've never taken part in slavery and people who never themselves had been treated or viewed as such. You're asking people to pay out for something that they didn't do or had no involvement in. And that's the other thing. Like, at what point is this broken down into percentages? Because there are people in the United States who weren't even here when this happened. Their families weren't even here when this happened. So are they just having to pay a sin tax for their skin color if they immigrated over later? Or what about people who are immigrating here to the United States now from, Hispanic countries? What about, clearly there are a lot of families who immigrated from countries like Cuba and Venezuela and elsewhere who were obviously not here. How are you going to hold, are they going to be held responsible also and have to cut a check? Or is that going to be a lesser percentage than someone else who's white? That's a huge question. What about Irish Americans who themselves were also slaves? Irish were treated horribly. What about that? Do they get a deduction for percentage? What about American Indians? Do they get a deduction?
I have a question too, because half of my family, the Mexican side of my family, wasn't here till after this was all over.
Yeah.
But my dad's side, they were here before then. So how will that be worked out? Yeah,
do you only have to write a 50% check?
Right. What are they expecting from me?
Yeah, like my family is Norwegian and Irish and American Indian. That's my family ancestry. So we have registry numbers from the trail, the commissions, the Dawes Commission. So do you then get a deduction based on the percentage of whatever ancestor's ethnicity is in your blood? I mean, and then I had family. I mean, there's some of my husband's family that didn't come over here until like right before the Civil War. Some of them were killed in the Civil War. His great grandfather, there's news articles about him, Gustavus Lash, was a POW for Confederates. He was held in Andersonville prison. He was one of the very few people to make it out alive. He was tortured, beaten, and he fought for freedom. So does he still have to pay? Do his descendants have to pay? That's the thing. I mean, my family never. Oh, and then don't forget, there were some American Indian communities that actually did own slaves. So do only those nations that did, do they have to pay full, or do they get a discount? I mean, are they, and then what about the African tribal nations in Africa that sold their own fellows or either enemy tribal nations into slavery in the first place? Are they going to be expected to write a check? Because I don't know how you can have a discussion about reparations and not include that aspect of it as well. Evil's committed, and evil people will take advantage of that evil that was committed. So that's kind of, there's a lot of questions that come into this. A lot of questions. But furthermore, you're holding people responsible for something that they didn't do. I mean, it's really, that's pretty awful.